Hey there, and welcome to the Catching Up with Casey show, where we talk about anything and everything that has to do with building cohesive, vision-driven teams. I am Casey Watts, school impact strategist and the host of this show. Now, if you are here, then you inevitably are an instructional leader who wants to make change happen, even when change seems impossible. And you can do that if you have cohesive, vision-driven teams that have done clarity work. They know exactly where they're headed and how they're going to get there. These teams have done identity work, and they've built their self and social awareness skills. And they have done collaboration work, and they know how to move beyond faux collaboration to get to true collaboration where change happens and where people get on board. I'm so excited to bring to you conversations that help you to do exactly that. The work that needs to be done to build cohesive, vision-driven teams. Now, with all of that said, let's dive into today's conversation. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode. We are jumping into episode 97 tonight, and it is titled Creating Initiative Alignment. And yes, I have with me some school turnaround experts, and they're going to be sharing all about this. And I'm really, really excited for this conversation. And I hope that you are too. And I hope that you will share some of what you glean from this conversation in the comments on YouTube, LinkedIn, or send me a message and let me know. If you're listening to this on the podcast, let me know what your biggest takeaways were. Okay, so I'm going to introduce to you our guests for tonight, and I'm going to have them share a little bit about themselves. We've got Chad Ransom with us, Christi Roberts, and Becca Silver. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
for having me.
Okay, we're going to start off with Chad. Why don't you guys, Chad and Christi, why don't you introduce yourselves to our audience?
Sure. Yeah. Christi, you want me to go first?
Of course.
All right. So former teacher, instructional coach, school principal, and then district office before I had the chance to move into doing some consulting work when I left to finish up my PhD, and have been doing consulting with schools now for almost 8 years, and loving the opportunity to help systems kind of across the country and lots of different states. And so really excited to be here.
Awesome. Christi?
Yeah. Hi. Similar background as Chad. I taught for 20 years in public classrooms, did some program management at a more administrative level, started my own private school for a hot second there during the pandemic, and also continued working on my doctoral work, working with curriculum and instruction and mathematics and multilingual learners. So a lot of fun in public education. And I think if I had to describe myself, I'd say I'm a cheerleader for teachers.
I love it. That's awesome. And you guys are the co-founders of Compass Edvantage, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Can you take a moment to tell our audience about that? And then we're going to jump over and have Becca share about herself and her company.
Sure. Yeah, we support school systems with lots of different types of projects, ranging from multilingual learner work, starting dual immersion programs, evaluating EL programming, to full school turnaround. So comprehensive, failing school turnaround type projects, and also really cool taking schools that just really want to get better and helping them go as far as they can.
Nice. That's awesome. Okay, Becca, tell us about yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Becca Silver. I'm the CEO and founder of The Whole Educator. And I'm host of another podcast. And it gives you an idea. Casey, I don't know why I haven't had you on mine. I think that would be so much fun.
Let's do it.
So my podcast is called Coaching the Whole Educator. And so just briefly, my background was I was a teacher for 10 years. When I became an instructional coach, I also became a life coach. And I saw there were a lot of crossover skills that brought me from pretty ineffective to wildly effective. And so I've really based my work around mindsets and motivations, and how do we work with the whole human and not around people's humanity. And so
Yes.
I've been working with Chad and Christi with school turnaround work. And I love being part of the team, and I love learning from them as well. So we love working together.
Yeah. And I can tell, I mean, it's so funny, you know, like when I have a group of people on here, especially people that work together, you can tell when there's like a solid connection, you know, like that kind of connection where it's like, I probably could finish your sentences.
Yeah.
What I'm going to say is going to be as good, if not better than what you were going to say. So, and then we're going to turn around and you're going to do the same thing to me. So yeah, this is awesome. I love these kinds of conversations with groups of people. And I know we're probably going to get into this, but I have to say it from the get-go, especially because you guys have all kind of been in a few different roles, but especially as an instructional coach, where you're kind of in this, what I call the intermundium, like you're in this in-between worlds of teacher and administrator. And it's almost like you're bridging the gap between teacher and administrator, or like trying to connect those narratives for them, because sometimes it's very different narratives. Would you guys say that that's something that you experience?
Definitely. I think there's a lot of gaps to be bridged when it comes to education and talking about systems. And definitely the teacher administrator gap is one that we focus on a lot. We also focus on knowing and doing gaps, situations where we know we should be doing something in a particular way, but we can't seem to make it happen. Mm-hmm. And Chad and I in particular, with our backgrounds, focus a lot on gapping between leadership, because his doctoral work was in leadership and mine was more based in the classroom. So we try to bring those two together very strongly.
And I'll just add the coach piece. So of all the roles that I had, being an instructional coach was my favorite. It was the favorite work that I did. And I really moved on in order to have a bigger impact. But if I would have been able to, I would have stayed as a coach. And I actually, 2 hours ago, literally just left a session with a bunch of instructional coaches in a district. And it was all about, how do you survive in this place where you have lots and lots of responsibilities? You often don't have the authority to be a decision maker. You're trying to manage up and also support people down. And so the survival piece around how you influence, how you don't get burned out, was all about what we were talking about.
Nice. I love that. Becca, what do you have to add to that, since you do focus on like the whole educator?
Yeah. So one of the things I love is, like, coaches were excellent classroom teachers, right? And then shift from, they live the Peter principle, right? So there's this leadership principle that people get promoted out of their skill set. So they are these excellent classroom teachers. They become an instructional coach, and suddenly, and they're expected to like spread their awesomeness, right? And yet there are skills that need to be built to impact their new people, right? It's no longer children, it's adults. And so I love working in that space. And I think it's so important that we name over and over and over again that instructional coaches aren't immediately fully equipped to coach. We need additional training, because this is a different job. So I think that's where my passion is, and where it's, we talk about gaps, right? Like there's a skill gap that automatically happens when someone shifts from classroom to coach.
Yeah. Just like there would be if someone's shifting from classroom teacher to administrator, or instructional coach to administrator, exactly. Or administrator to like district administrator. Like I think we forget all of those little nuances and the shift that you have to make when you're going into those roles. And so I think this is going to be a good segue into our topic, because in my opinion, and I assume you guys would agree, that it takes all of the different roles to be able to create initiative alignment, right? And so what I want to hear about is just in your experience, because what we know is that there are so many schools that struggle so significantly with misaligned initiatives. And we know that there are consequences for like school culture and performance. So tell us a little bit about what your experience has been with that.
I feel like I don't want to be the one to always go first.
Okay, it's your turn now. And then we'll go to Christi.
Okay. So I don't know that I've ever worked in any system where I was working in the system or from an outside perspective that didn't have some form of struggle with aligning initiatives and really the lost productivity that exists there, the burnout. And so a lot of the work that we do, regardless of the program model we're supporting a system with, or even none of those things exist in isolation. So you can't do any initiative and not consider how do these things align. And if they're not coherent, so I really love the word coherent with alignment, because Becca's like, if Chad says coherence one more time.
I had a nickel for every time Chad said coherent.
Because I love the science music connection around, so sound waves that are coherent build off of each other, they amplify, and we get the benefit then of working in a system where we're amplifying each other's work, versus when they aren't, then you have dissonance and you're actually eroding each other's work. So it's not even like I'm working really hard and you're working really hard. We could be negating each other if we don't have that. So I would just say, to start off the discussion, it's so critically important that it gets addressed, and it often is not.
And Chad, you and I have talked a lot about like the good part of the misaligned initiatives piece is that it's the reason, it's where it's coming from. And the reason there's misaligned initiatives is because there's so much pressure to improve everything all at once. Like we want to do it all because we know that's good for kids. Like all these things are going to make things better for students in the long run, or better for teachers in the long run. And we want to get everything fixed. But we also know on the flip side of that really can be detrimental to the long-term, the longevity of the program or the process or the system. So I wanted to acknowledge that like misalignment often comes from a good place. The other piece, when we think about why so many schools end up misaligned with their initiatives, I really come back to who were the stakeholders that had a voice in a voice at the table. Because if the people that have to do the work don't have a voice at the table, there's a misalignment immediately. So whenever we think about going into systems and helping them, we need to make sure that everybody gets to be a part of that conversation.
The thing I want to let you jump in there.
Oh, the thing I wanted to add, just kind of a different element to this, is thinking about external alignment and internal alignment. So right, there's like the system, right? Maybe a school district alignment within a district, or alignment within a school, right? That external, outside of the person. And then there's an internal alignment. How does all of these things happening align with what's important to me, my motivations, right? So I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about that internal and external alignment, how both are really important.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the things that I'm writing a book about the craft of clarity, and I feel like it connects really well to that coherence piece. But one of the things that I've thought about recently, and I think it connects to what you were saying, Chad, about just like when there is coherence, there's actually a feeling that comes along with that, right? And I think that also attributes to that internal piece that you're talking about, Becca. When I have clarity around something, number one, there's like a spark, like when I have clarity around, oh, this is why that happened. Or I have clarity around, oh my gosh, yes, I know exactly how I want to decorate the tree now. Like just something as simplistic as that. There is actually a feeling of comfort and confidence that comes with that. And I think the same is true for alignment in schools, is when there is that coherent piece and we have people who have, like, the stakeholders have been a part of this, there is that comfort and confidence that comes in pursuing these initiatives together.
So I couldn't agree more about the clarity piece, and saying like we can't be aligned if we're not clear on where we're trying to go, right? There's no way to line up arrows if you don't know the direction that you're trying to have them go. And often I think we have all this research around in classrooms, teacher clarity, and how clear is a teacher on where we're going and how they share that with kids. And we know how powerful that is. I mean, Hattie's research quite clear, right? why would we not also assume that that needs to be true for adults and for programs or initiatives in a system? We have to have the same level of clarity of here's where we're going together, and here's how these things line up and make that happen.
Yeah. If we were in a room together right now and we weren't held back by, the online microphone issue, where you can't all talk at one time, it would be blowing up. Like, I imagine us around a campfire, just drinking our coffee and all talking on top of each other. So excited because I'm just so excited about this conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the thing though. We can know that misalignment is an issue, right? Like, it's happening. But people don't know, even their efforts, even if at their best efforts, they struggle to create alignment. So you guys have an exercise or a framework that you take coaches and leaders through. And I know that our audience would love to hear about that. So what does this process look like for you guys in action?
Do you want me to start it off, Chad, since you're...
I believe in equity.
I think I'll start off, and Chad, then you can jump in right after this. But one of the things that Chad and I both really firmly believe, and I think Becca aligns with this as well, is that when we start processes with systems, we make sure that we understand the context and the system as a whole, and some of the things that are important to that context and important to that system, because that's going to be our foundation for pushing forward. And we also very firmly believe, and it's one of our catchphrases, co-creation builds capacity, that we're going to create with this team of people. And not only is the product or the process going to be amazing, we're also building the capacity of these people to do that same product and process later on with a different group of people, or at a different time, or with a different system. So Chad, if you want to pick up from there.
Sure. Yeah. And we'll give you like sort of some steps. And I just want to say sort of, because context matters. And, we make the mistake of saying we're going to replicate exactly something from research or something from another school, and we don't recognize the importance of the context piece. So, but before I do the steps, I feel like I'm, doing these teasers of where we're going. I just want to add the other really important piece to build off of what Christi said, and that's the relationships that get built both through what she was just describing, and also the importance of them in the process. So, like, I don't think we can say, here, do this change process devoid of the relationships and the culture and getting to know the context. So, just to make that point. So part of our process, obviously, with co-creation is to involve as many stakeholders or whatever makes sense in the context as possible and as feasible, right? To not overwhelm people. And it also really depends on if, like, this big project we're doing in Arizona, which is full school turnaround for multiple schools, is like giant audit and huge state improvement plan that they require. And, so that's a much bigger process than we would do if we were doing a needs assessment for a program and helping a system move forward. But they're similar in how do you identify what the needs are? So whether that's a giant component or not. How do you then evaluate which of those is most important? So prioritize, and that gets you to clarity, right? So you're really understanding what those pieces are, and then thinking about the plan and how you would create the plan to make that happen. Each of those involves input from the various stakeholder groups, and if I was going to really narrow down into this idea of how do you, within that process, create alignment of initiatives, we use, and I'm sure many people know of, feasibility impact matrix, and thinking about, here are the options we have that we've discussed and brainstormed together. Which of them will make the biggest difference and is also most feasible to help us prioritize? So we do big chart paper with those continuums up to help the team identify which pieces are most important. But that the priority importance piece, when you have it visually in that way, you can also start to think about alignment. So if you have a visual way of putting pieces together, then you also have the conversation of, we're going to start with this, or this is our leverage point. And here's how these other two things fit within that, so that we have a focus and we have priorities. And also we still have to do some of the other work as well. And so it's that then conversation of how those nest together and align comes out of that process.
Yeah. Would it be true to say that when you're thinking about those and how, because you use the word nest, and how really when we're looking at alignment and we're thinking about, here are the things that we have to do, and sometimes that can feel burdensome to the people who are having to do them, thinking that it's just like the one more thing added to our plate. But what it sounds like you're saying is, we can look at it as, when you do this, you're actually supporting these other things that are expectations, or vice versa.
I think there's some weight to the way in which you have people give their input and participate in the project, because you're right, it could be really overwhelming. There's giant audits with, huge plans, and how do we there's hundreds of findings and all these recommendations. One of the best things that we use all the time is to make sure we always have a protocol in place. So there's a step-by-step way to go through the hundreds of things that we're thinking about. And we do those with groups individually and as a whole, so that they can all have a voice, but not be overwhelmed by all the steps that actually happen in the whole process. And teachers in particular, I think, really appreciate a protocol, because it gives them a boundary and a thing to think about that's really specific. Just like Chad was saying, teachers love teacher clarity. We love a posted objective. It's the same type of situation. So we know what our success criteria is. We know what our outcomes are going to be, and we're walking through the steps to get there. So again, coming back to clarity being kind of at the heart of the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll just add that, so that nesting idea with that goal, I think is really important for two reasons. It's the alignment and coherence that we've been talking about, but it's also the focus that it provides. So as a teacher or a coach or a leader, I can only be focused on so many things. And yet we have to do many things. We would like to say, just focus on the most important. If I'm able to nest those or align those within specific focused leverage points, or sometimes we use through lines, then I can see that I'm working on this particular topic in order to get to something else. So for example, on this project that we're in right now, one of the through lines is really helping kids get more relevancy from their learning, that they're really invested in the learning. And that's one of the focuses. So this is a primary focus, that we're helping kids understand the rationale and relevancy for what they're doing. Well, the work that entails is some curriculum mapping. It entails some alignment to ACT work. It entails working with teachers on embedding rationale in their lessons. So there's still work, right? There's still a lot of different work, but when you put those all together in that way, people can hold it in their mind and see how that's working together to get to one particular focus.
Yeah. Becca, how do you see, from the perspective of someone who, not just an instructional coach, but a leader as a coach, how do you see leaders as coaches coming in and supporting this work from that standpoint?
There's a huge role that I feel like they wear lots of hats, and one of them is listening for engagement within all of this alignment work and the implementation of the work in general, right? So I say engagement, there's a continuum of buy-in, ownership, engagement, commitment, right? And so I say engagement as more than just buy-in, because what's beautiful is what denotes buy-in from engagement is who's at the table, like Christi was saying. Right. So what's awesome is when we include teachers to be at the table of the alignment work and the decision-making work, we don't have to build buy-in. We are now growing engagement and ownership. And so I think a hugely important role that coaches have is listening for and watching for that engagement in the work, we're not being passive here. We are actively moving the work forward.
Yeah. And I'm going to probe further. When you do notice that engagement, what do you do with it? What do you do about it?
Oh, like, okay, when there is engagement?
Yeah.
This is for the change process, because change, everyone doesn't change at one time, right? And so the change model I like most often is the change adoption curve, where there's the who's before the first people that adopted, and then the early adopters, the chunk, and then the early majority and the late majority, right? And those first folks that are engaged, we need to amplify their voices. Right. And if we really want to be intentional, the first folks, right, I think there's a beautiful balance of like asking for volunteers, but also noticing in schools who has strong social capital. Right. So we can really start to leverage the connections within our schools to make change.
Yeah. Okay, Chad, Chrissy, you're both like nodding your heads and going, What do you have to add to that? If anything, you may not, but that, and just want to hear.
Yeah, I love the social/cultural capital piece. It's definitely a move that we always do first. Who is the person that people admire, look up to, listen to in the building? And it's great. It's a great move for coaching, because a lot of times people get the feel that if you're getting coached, it's because you're not doing things correctly. And as soon as they see, the person they look up to, the person who has a strong voice or is listened to at the school, getting coached, then they feel far more comfortable and safe about that situation. And they're like, oh, well, if so-and-so can be coached, so can I. Like it's about all of us learning rather than someone not doing something correctly. So I love building off of that piece. Becca and I both firmly believe in that too.
Yeah. And I think too, and I don't know what your perspective is on this, but I will tell you, like, I know a lot of people will take a definitely a student-centered approach to coaching, which I think all coaching should be student-centered. I think that should be a given. But sometimes we see a lot of people taking a very teacher-centered approach to coaching, where they are determining like in the ways in which they want to grow, what their goals are. And I'm not saying that that's not important, but when you are trying to create alignment and you specifically have like a turnaround school, I believe that the work that you're doing in creating alignment allows you to be able to coach everyone collectively, but also individually. And it becomes very strategic and it becomes very collaborative, especially in a situation where it is a turnaround school or you have a Title I school and we're all focused on this one area and these goals that we're striving for. What are some thoughts that you have on that?
I want to share immediately. All right. I want to just name something here. I think sometimes in coaching, we have this conversation about it's either student-centered or it's teacher-centered. And I'm like, this is not a this or that. We have to choose. There are ways of coaching folks that align with the direction we're going in and include what is important to people. And I call it human-centered coaching. And it's like I needed to say that it doesn't have to be this or that. And that is something we're actively doing in Arizona with our folks. It is aligned work, and the teachers get to choose their goals within the scope of the aligned work because they're engaged in it, because they were part of the process of alignment.
Yeah, I kind of want to cry. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to cry on camera. But yeah. what our audience probably is not seeing, because the people are listening to this on the podcast, but I'm back here in the background, like clapping my hands, and we're all shaking our heads and smiling. Yes, absolutely. Guys, this is where because our next question that I want to talk about is navigating pushback. Resistance is a question that's going to come up all the time about this kind of work. It comes up in everything that we do. People want to talk about the resistant teachers. But if you have not built a culture of coaching underneath this umbrella of the vision that we are all working toward, then what's going to happen is people are going to see coaching as this negative thing where I'm coaching people who are struggling. I have had that experience, and it is just, it's awful to be a teacher in that position. It's awful to be a coach in that position where people see you as the person who comes in to fix it. So yes, I love everything that you just had to say about that. Thank you, Becca. Okay. So what about the pushback? Let's talk about resistance, because I know people are probably thinking, yeah, but what about your resistant stakeholders?
Yeah. Love everything that's being said right now. And Becca, I'm going to speak a tiny bit for the both of us, but I think we agree. We love resistance because
it's our jam.
Yeah, we love it. It's our jam. But we love it because if people aren't, it means they're thinking, right? It means that I'm processing this work that you're asking me to do. And I should be asking questions and I should be digging into it. The opposite is apathy. And that's the last thing I want, is an apathetic system. I want people who are thinking. Now, there's ways to navigate and work with that resistance and make it a positive piece for us. One of the biggest things that we do first is develop relationships, though. And being part of the process helps reduce the resistance. But a little bit of resistance, it makes it stronger. And I'll let Becca, I'm sure Becca has a bazillion things to say.
I do. Give me an hour.
Yeah,
or a whole day. So here's the deal about resistance. Human, and just like Christi said, we want critical thinkers as teachers. We hire critical thinkers. And so sometimes they're grappling with the change looks like resistance. Sometimes that's engagement. I like to say when I work with folks, I'm like, imagine you tell your whole school that there's a change happening and everyone goes, yes, I'll do that. And they go and do it. What would you call that? The answer is compliance. I once had a school leader yell, "Utopia." I'll never forget that. But I, and we don't want just compliance. We want people to be critically thinking about the change that happens. And so what do we do about that? Right? There's so many things I could say about it, but the basic thing is humans have different motivations, and we want to get to know what is important to our educators, right? We don't want them to just say yes all the time because they just want to follow directions.
Yeah.
We want to get their motivations, and we also want to understand the forms. And I think this is not often talked about a lot. The behaviors of resistance. There's ways to navigate that empowers people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll just add, because we could talk about this a ton. So maybe two things that I'll add. One is similar to when you think about classroom management. If you have a really good, strong, engaging lesson, you have less management. So if you engage people in the process, if you build relationships, if you have a clear plan that has clarity and that is aligned, you'll face less resistance. And also, don't hope for some magical plan that will have no resistance, because that does mean that people aren't engaging with it and aren't really thinking deeply about it. And so then you're recognizing, once you have the good foundation put in place, that for many people, this is coming from a really good place. And so how do you use that then to better understand, maybe there are tweaks that need to be made. Maybe I need to understand this person's motivation or situation better. So both are important, right? The proactive way in which we might prevent some resistance, and then also recognizing that it isn't this terrible thing that, I have to deal with again as a leader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of my favorite books is written by Chip and Dan Heath, and it's titled Switch: How to Change Things When Change is Hard. And they are notorious for saying what looks like resistance is often a lack of clarity. Mm-hmm. And even then, I love how you guys are noting, like, it should be expected. If we are in an organization full of a variety of people whose opinions are validated or valued and they are empowered, then they should be speaking up about how they're feeling about what's going on. And I think if we're noticing that, then chances are, unless it is, always, I think sometimes too, and I'm just going to say this real quick, and push back on this with your thoughts, but I think sometimes we equate resistance with negativity. And they're not, in my opinion, synonymous. Like I can be resistant to something because of what I value and currently believe, which may be accurate or may not be accurate, or may need to shift or not need to shift based on where we're headed. And so I'm going to bring that up if I feel like I'm in a safe enough environment to bring that up. But negativity is really kind of this other thing. It's like there are the toxic people, and I think they have their own things going on, and that could be one type of resistance. But I think we equate the two. And resistance, I love how you're saying it's not necessarily a negative thing. It's people critically thinking. That is like gold in this episode.
Yeah. If as a leader, you aren't ever getting pushback, resistant, people questioning, that would be a really strong indicator that you haven't created the type of culture where you can have successful change. Mm-hmm. So I would want that. And I coach leaders about ways in which you know that the culture is where you want. And one of those is people should be questioning, or like we use the term resisting for a bunch of different potential actions that people are engaging in. But that tells me that I actually have the type of culture that I want. And the way in which you manage that is going to then determine how the culture moves forward. Because if somebody in a meeting pushes back and you shut it down because you're insecure or that's your reaction, then you have dramatically decreased everybody else's desire to engage and own the work in a way that would move you forward productively as a building.
Yeah. And this last year, Becca introduced an idea to me that has really changed my thinking completely about resistance. And it is that resistance is because of an unmet need. I don't have the clarity that I need to push forward on this. I don't understand this. My time is full and I can't take this on. So understanding the unmet need of the resistance really helped me say, oh, wait a minute. They're not just pushing back to push back because they have nothing better to do. It's because there's something missing. And I, as a leader, can then help fill that need. And there may be a group of people that have the same need that I can provide more clarity, or I can give a voice, or I can, there's a million different solutions to those unmet needs. So thank you, Becca.
Yeah. And I want to add one more thing. I'm going to have 10 more things, but I'm trying to whittle it down.
Hey, we're going to have an episode together about that specifically.
Fantastic. I'm bursting. I'm bursting right now. I always say resistance is my jam, by the way. And a friend of mine sent me, he had AI make a jam jar that's labeled resistance.
Oh my gosh. That's so cute.
Okay. But the thing I want to say is resistance is a human experience. Mm-hmm. We talk about it like, oh, the bad people resist and oh, I'm enlightened. And no. All of us here on this call, everyone listening experiences resistance. So I always like to say, think about your mother-in-law. When people chuckle, they're like, right? But like, yeah, I know you're resisting your mother-in-law, right? Or we can resist things like the gym. We resist things and people. This is a normal human experience. This isn't the thing that bad people do. And there's one other thing I want to share, which is with my language. I do not say resistant teachers. I say teachers experiencing resistance. Because the moment we label people something, they stay that way. They stay fixed that way. Mm-hmm. They stay the very thing, resistant, that we don't want them to be. We keep them that way. Mm-hmm. I want to share those things.
Yeah, I love that. I was just like, where I don't have a pen. I have nothing around me to take these notes, but I can go back and listen to this episode again, which I'm hoping audience, if you're listening, this is one of those that you like, definitely save, download, leave a review for, comment on, and come back to it. Okay, we're coming to the end of this episode, which is so sad because what great conversation we're having. I feel like all of us could probably talk about this all the live long day. Mm-hmm. But tell our audience like the biggest takeaways or any final thoughts that you have that you're like, man, I can't let this episode end without talking about this.
I want to share something. It might be kind of simple, but one of the things, the exercise we did, the kind of big, one of the alignment exercises we did, that I and Chad and Christi created this. This is 100. I helped to execute, but that was it, and it was all their idea. The simplicity of it was brilliant, and I mean, there's more to this. But the basic idea of putting on one sheet of paper every single initiative and thing you all the things you run PDs on, which sometimes we find like, oh, I'm running PDs on this, but there's initiatives on this, right? Everything that we are growing and developing in, every initiative on one sheet of paper. Christi had to get the extra long sheet of paper for our work because it's so much. Get it down on a sheet of paper. Get it down.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I think my key takeaway, and we haven't talked about this yet, is as a person helping to facilitate and implement these types of big scale plans or big projects, you have to find ways to facilitate small wins. There have to be consistent and constant wins along the way. Otherwise, you'll lose your momentum and it will come to a screeching halt. So you have to make sure that those are available and happening.
Yeah.
Often.
All right. I'll reiterate two things and then add one. So we mentioned earlier the co-creation builds capacity. So just relationships, involving people, preventing some resistance in the future because you have buy-in and a better understanding. We talked about coherence. So apparently I cannot leave, Becca says, without saying coherence again. She texted me already. And the one that I'll add is at the end of all of that, the challenge of leadership sometimes is the hold the course piece. Mm-hmm. So, we created an aligned plan and then something else came up and there's some other outside pressure and there's something else. And that ability as a leader and then to foster that within the system to hold the course is a super important part of alignment that ends up getting missed. We plan for it, but then we don't stick to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Got a plan to do the plan, like actually put the plan onto your calendar so that you don't miss those times to revisit it.
Yep. I'm sure this number has, or this percentage has shifted over time, but the last piece of research that I read from Harvard Business Review, I think, said 63% of strategic plans fail. And it's not a surprise. It's hard. It's hard work to maintain that, especially if you have not co-created, then you are the lone ranger trying to make change happen. And it's just impossible that way. Just impossible. Okay. Oh my gosh. This has been so much fun. Like I said, I could carry on this conversation. So if anybody wants to keep chatting about this, listen, we want to talk about it clearly. So where can our audience find you guys? Chad and Christi, where can our audience find you guys?
Yeah, our website is just www.compassedvantage.com. So not advantage. We thought we were really clever with the Edvantage. We just made a bunch of spelling errors instead. Compassedvantage.com.
And that has our website, that is our website, has our emails. And then also at the top there, we did just put like a really quick link for people that are listening into this for like a 2-page overview of just the change process that we kind of described. So, we obviously didn't have a chance to talk through everything. It would be way too much. And so for listeners, you can just get a quick 2-page document.
Love it. Becca, where can our audience find you?
My website's thewholeeducator.com. You can check me out there. I'm on all social media, The Whole Educator and Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn. Find me on anywhere. You can search Becca Silver or The Whole Educator, and I will be there.
Awesome. And guys, you're going to see all of this in the show notes on YouTube and on the podcast platforms that you tune in. So just be sure to check that out. You'll see all of those links. And thank you guys so much for coming on. This has been great.
Yeah,
thank you.
All right. Well, we will catch you all next time. Bye, everybody. Hey there, thanks for joining this episode. I would love for you to do me 3 solid favors before you head out. Number 1, subscribe to this show. I've got a lot of great guests and content coming up, and I don't want you to miss any of it. Number 2, share this show. Share it with your like-minded colleagues and friends and those leaders who are eager to build cohesive, vision-driven teams. And finally, connect with me on all the social media platforms. You can find me at Catch Up with KC on Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Until next time, go off and create teams that leave people feeling inspired, empowered, and eager for more each day.